Welcome to this explainer. Okay, we are jumping right in today because we have a lot to cover. We're going to break down the massive geopolitical and economic earthquakes triggered by the 2026 Middle East conflict. We'll be pulling directly from source reports, everything from Wikipedia timelines to PBS news dispatches and House of Commons library briefings to unpack exactly how a localized conflict managed to grab the entire global economy and bring it to a screeching, sudden halt. Let's kick things off with a staggering number, $120 billion. That's right, billion with a B. That represents the estimated economic cost to Arab countries alone by late March of 2026. This absolute financial hemorrhage happened right alongside a jaw-dropping reality, which was that 20% of the world's traded petroleum was just suddenly frozen in transit. So, how exactly did we get here? How does a regional war send these immediate, brutal shockwaves through the wallets of people sitting on the complete opposite side of the planet? Well, to understand that, we actually have to look past the physical battlefields and focus our attention on the literal arteries of international trade.
Think about the geography for a second. The Strait of Hormuz is essentially a giant natural bottleneck right between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. The shipping lanes here are incredibly tight. We're talking just 2 miles wide in either direction. So whoever controls this narrow, tiny strip of water effectively holds a giant dial that controls global energy prices.
Part 1. The Spark. February 2026.
All right, so according to the compiled historical reports, this whole thing moved at blinding speed. It started with a backdrop of severe internal chaos in Iran, mass protests and brutal crackdowns in January 2026. Then, boom, February 28th, the US and Israel launched surprise airstrikes, which resulted in the assassination of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. And the response was immediate. Iran launched this massive retaliation, firing hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles at Israel, US military bases, and neighboring Arab states.
Now, this is where it gets kind of murky. As documented by the Wikipedia sources, the Trump administration actually offered several different, completely varied rationales for why they initiated the strikes right in the middle of ongoing nuclear negotiations. They ranged from preventing a suspected imminent attack to wiping out nuclear capabilities, all the way to outright regime change.
Part 2. Strait of Hormuz, a vital route. You see, it's not just crude oil at stake here. We are talking about almost all of the liquid natural gas, or LNG, from places like Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. 93% and 96% respectively must pass through this exact same narrow corridor. If this strait closes, a massive, massive portion of the fuel the world uses for heating and electricity just cannot leave the region. And close it did. Following the outbreak of the war, shipping traffic absolutely tanked to roughly 5% of its pre-conflict volume. I mean, to put that in perspective for you, a route that normally saw around 3,000 vessels a month dropped to just 5 or 6 a day. The waters practically turned into a ghost town.
And make no mistake, this was not some accident. It was a stated, intentional strategy. Statements from the Iranian side, like this one right here, from Mojtaba Khamenei, Iran's new supreme leader, show a clear commitment to using the strait's closure as ultimate leverage in the broader war. They knew exactly where the global economy was the most vulnerable.
Part 3. Dual blockades, war at sea.
So out on the water, we are looking at a total, grinding stalemate. It's a classic dual blockade. On one side, Iran set up this Persian Gulf Strait Authority that vets and taxes ships, notably charging tolls in Chinese yuan to sidestep U.S. sanctions. And on the flip side, you have the U.S. counterblockade. The U.S. military is physically blocking ships trying to enter Iranian ports to buy sanctioned oil, and they're actively intercepting and disabling any vessels that try to run that blockade.
And things got incredibly kinetic, incredibly fast. By early May, PBS News reported the warfare at sea had severely intensified. We're talking U.S. fighter jets literally shooting out the smokestacks of Iranian tankers. The UAE reported intercepting incoming missiles. And perhaps most horrifying for the environment, satellite imagery detected an 80,000-barrel oil spill spreading from Iran's Karg Island terminal. And experts say it likely won't be cleaned up anytime soon because, well, it's sitting smack in the middle of an active war zone.
The rhetoric matching these military actions? Absolutely blistering. This quote from U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio perfectly demonstrates the aggressive posture driving the U.S. enforcement of its counter-blockade. Basically, neither side is showing any willingness to back down from this massive maritime game of chicken.
Part 4. Economic shockwaves, global impact.
Okay, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
When you suddenly slice off 1/5 of the entire world's petroleum supply, the math is just brutal and immediate. It triggers a global energy crisis at a scale we literally haven't seen since the oil shocks of the 1970s. The ripple effects just smash into manufacturing, transportation, and consumer prices across the entire globe.
It got so bad that the international community basically had to pull the emergency brake. 32 countries and the International Energy Agency were forced into a massive coordinated dump of 400 million barrels of emergency oil reserves. The UK alone had to contribute 13.5 million barrels just to try and calm the utter panic happening in the markets.
And the financial bleeding? It is astronomical, and it's hitting everyone. The U.S. military burned through $18 billion in just the first few weeks, and they requested $200 billion more. Arab countries lost over $120 billion. But look at Iran. Their own government estimates the economic damage to their country at anywhere from $300 billion to a mind-boggling $1 trillion. This is, for sure, a war of economic attrition on all sides.
Part 5. Diplomatic Chessboard, Seeking Resolution.
So there was a glimmer of hope on April 8th with a temporary ceasefire brokered over in Islamabad, Pakistan, but you guys, Fragile doesn't even begin to cover it. The truce is just buckling under the weight of these dual blockades. The U.S. demands the strait be opened, Iran demands the U.S. lift its port blockade. It is the ultimate catch-22.
Plus, the international community is completely fractured on how to actually fix this. The House of Commons library briefing notes a really stark diplomatic divide. On the western side, you have the UK and France planning this independent, defensive military mission to clear mines and escort commercial ships once a sustainable truce holds. But on the eastern side, China and Russia literally vetoed a UN resolution that would have authorized those escorts. They argue that the root issue isn't Iranian aggression, but the US blockade itself. Which brings us to the ultimate question, the real takeaway from this explainer. What happens if diplomacy just flat out fails? If the Islamabad talks collapse entirely, how long can the global economy actually endure this maritime standoff? We are looking at a very real scenario where temporary emergency energy shortages could mutate into permanent structural damage to the way the world trades. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the source material on this unfolding crisis. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will catch you in the next explainer.